to another episode of The Only Playbook. We are so excited to have you guys here because, as you can see, we have a special guest with us. This is episode 57, where we are going to break down the top 10 running backs of fantasy football in 2022. And this episode specifically, I have deemed Tej Talk, because we are joined by none other than former PFF research and development intern Tej Seth. Tej, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's an absolute treat, and we certainly appreciate your time.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk running backs with you guys today. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, the position that, slowly people are just pushing further and further away when it comes to the actual NFL draft, but there's still tremendous value in top echelon running backs versus kind of the rest of the pack. And so hopefully you'll dive into a lot of that and blow our brains with some of the analytics. But let's start things off. Again, we appreciate you guys joining us. If you're, supporting us throughout this past 9 months that we've, come about, we're everywhere, all the platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, Anchor, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. So appreciate all the support. The name of this game in this episode is going to be talking about the running backs. So we'll start things off with our top 10 running backs. The way I'm going to do this, guys, is I had all of your lists ahead of time. So I basically created a consensus list. And if I had a guy that wasn't on somebody else's list, I basically gave them a number 11 to average things out as the 11th ranked player. So for the sake of averages, we'll go 10 through 1. Feel free to chime in on any running back that you want to talk about, or or shit on or trash or say they suck, whatever the case may be. So without further ado, the top 10 running backs of the 2022 NFL fantasy football season. Number 10 came in Leonard Fournette, the running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I actually had Leonard Fournette number 8 on my list. Shashot, you did not have him ranked. Shovit, you had him 9. And Tej, I believe you also did not have him ranked. So he comes in here at number 10 for me. I'll kick things off really easy. I mean, for me, it's another year with Tom Brady. We continued to, at least I did, doubt Leonard Fournette. I was like, he's kind of there. He does good things with what he's given, but it didn't seem like the workload was there from rushing. But then, towards the end of last year, he started catching a ton of passes. And so I think that helped to really solidify his safe fantasy stature. I know they got Keyshawn Vaughn, I think, as their backup, and he's quick, he's shifty, but I don't know that he's really going to seep into too much of Leonard Fournette's production. And knowing that, Gronk is not there, we don't know if he's going to come back. Evans is there, obviously. Godwin's hurt, and then Gage is another new receiver they have. I think Tom Brady's going to have the tendency to go to people he's comfortable with. So that dump off to Fournette was really, really big. Checking down has been a big part of Tom Brady's game. So that's why I had Leonard Fournette as number 10 on the rankings, and that's where he came in on the consensus. What do you guys think there?
Yeah, I'll go next. I didn't rank Fournette, not because I don't like Fournette. Fournette is the classic bell cow. He's getting passes, he's getting rushes, he's a goal line back. He's got Tom Brady as a quarterback to take care of the secondary. There's no reason to not rank him, besides the fact that there are other players that I think have a higher ceiling than Fournette. Volume is the name of the game, so you can't go wrong with adding him on this top 10, because there's not, there's a few players that stand out amongst everybody else just because of pure volume. And Fournette is one of those guys. So I don't think it's a bad idea not having in the top 10. I just think certain players like DeAndre Swift, players like maybe a little bit lower than him that we never consider to be in the top 10. They're coming up, and they're going to be up and coming for this next season. And I think they have a much higher ceiling than Fournette, because I think we may have seen the best of Fournette. Although he's only 27 years old, he still has a lot of play time left, and there's not much backups there. He's a great player. I just think he would be like a number 11 or number 12 for me.
Yeah, I mean, I had Leonard Fournette just because of the dump offs, really. Tom Brady, he's got weapons. He's got Evans, and, he can throw the ball. But I think the dump offs in the game where, catching is a lot of value to running backs as far as fantasy football goes. I think that's going to get you a solid, consistent, 11 to 12, maybe even more points per game that you got to be satisfied with at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the reason I was a little bit hesitant with Fournette is because last year the Bucs offense passed a ton on, early downs in the red zone. And that's partly because I think like Brady is trying to build up his stats to show that he can win an MVP, or he can lead the league in passing yards at age 45. So that's why I was worried with Fournette is with Brady in Tampa, he's been about pushing the ball downfield, having a very high average depth of target, and then like passing a lot within the 5 and 10 yard line to get those passing touchdown numbers up. So I didn't think Fournette was going to get as many like goal line carries as like other running backs that I had ahead of him.
Yeah, no, that's a really fair point. You're right. Brady's at the point in his career where I don't think he has anything left to prove in terms of winning. And I know he's built differently. So I know he obviously still cares about winning, but that's not going to come with the stat padding and the getting the extra touchdowns and things like that. Yeah, to continue to build that resume. So I absolutely respect that logic. It's just, again, when we're talking about fantasy, a lot of times we come into a situation where you're like, who's the backup? Who's he going to share any sort of time with? And right now, like, again, Vaughn just seems like a very much change of pace guy that's not necessarily even going to get like 10 carries or 7 carries right now, right? So for that reason alone, when you're in an offense with a guy like Tom Brady, you're always going to have upside, in my opinion. But you're right. If Brady's going to care more about the passing touchdowns, we just got to hope dump off Fournette's on the opposing end of those. So that's why we had Leonard Fournette again. He fell at number 10. Number nine was Joe Mixon. And this is a little bit surprising. He came in number 9 on the consensus board. I had him as exactly number 9. Shashot, you actually did not rank Joe Mixon. Shovit, you had him number 10, and Tej, I believe you had him as high as number 7. So the funniest thing is, Tej, I want to kick this one to you first. Your description was awesome on all your running backs, but I loved Mixon's the best. All it says is average running back with big volume. And like, there is not a better way to describe Joe Mixon in that situation. So Tej, tell us why you had Joe Mixon where he's at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm pretty high on Joe Mixon this year because I think that Bengals offensive line is pretty well upgraded based on all the moves they made this offseason. And, you know, like a lot of the research that the analytics community has done is on how much the offensive line controls a running back's performance. So, you know, you could see Joe Mixon's like 4 yards a carry last year start to turn into 4.5 this year. And with like 350 carries or whatever he gets, like because of the lack of competition in the backfield, that's huge to get like an extra like 0.5 yards a carry. And you know, he's just gonna get a lot of volume behind a much improved offensive line. I think he had to like grind out a lot of yards last year that are gonna be much more well blocked this year. And you know, the Bengals like showed that they like to rely on running the ball a lot on early downs to kind of protect Burrow and just different stuff like that. So that's why I was so high on him in my rankings.
Yeah, I'm just not a Joe Mixon fan. He's let me down so many times in the past. You know, the thing about fantasy football is this is the part where the analytics versus the eye test comes into play, right? There's certain players that if they irk you the wrong way at any point, you fail to give him another opportunity. And for me, Joe Mixon's a classic running back for that scenario. He gets, you know, early on, maybe 3-4 years ago, he was drafted a lot higher than he was last year. He got drafted mid-second round last year. And that was the reason for that was because he let a lot of people down. And it's not because he gets injured or anything like that. It's because the production is just not there. With the volume he's getting, you're supposed to be getting number 3, number 4 numbers, and you're not getting that. But there are a lot of good things. Again, this is the top 10 list, right? This is the top 10 elite athletes that run the ball. So it's hard to, you know, fit everybody into this. I would put him he would be right there with Fournette at 11 or 12 for me because of volume. He's also a great pass catcher. He ran a route on 57% of offensive dropbacks through 6 games. It started off pretty good. And he was 3rd in the league in total touches and 6th in touches per game. These are all volume numbers, right? So volume wise, like you said, Tej, he's an average running back. I would say slightly above average with a very, very high volume that improved his offense. So there's nothing to not like about him. It's just, I feel like there are other players that could give me number 1 potential, like the Swifts, like the Chubbs that some of you guys haven't ranked. I'm going with the huge upside rather than the consistency here, which is very unlike me because I'm a big consistency guy. I like seeing the same shit every year because it's reliable. However, certain players like Joe Mixon, I just don't trust. I don't trust him for whatever reason. There's sometimes that gut feeling takes a hold of you. And I have 10 other players that I would rather have than have Joe Mixon.
I think Shashot's just sick of winning the league. He's won it like 4 years in the 15 years of existence, being consistent. So he's like, you know what? Got to change it up. Let's go for high upside guys this year because I need to keep things spicy. So I don't know. I think for me, Joe Mixon is, again, exactly what you guys said. He's not flashy. He's not really exciting. It's interesting to me that he ran routes on that many percentages of 3rd downs because kind of what I've read up on him and the way I'm transitioning and seeing what they're looking at for this season is that he's going to be the classic first down, second down guy. And then Samaje Perine's going to be the guy that catches passes on third down. Now it's weird because Mixon can catch the ball and he can do it effectively. So I don't know why Samaje Perine would even step in at all to do that. But it also, maybe it's just a situation of the lifespan of a running back, knowing that you're going to keep Mixon very, very fresh on first and second downs to maximize his rushes as opposed to utilizing him on third down and getting hit when he's trying to catch the ball as well. So again, I think the upside's there. The offense is so prolific and dynamic that you have to imagine now with, Higgins, scratching top 10 lists for running or receivers now, the production of Jamar Chase and T Higgins is going to force this defense to have to take steps back. Right. And I think with the upgraded offensive line, like you mentioned, Tej, and it's just going to get a little bit easier for Joe Mixon to run. And I think that's naturally, if they're going to feed him the ball 250 to 275 times, the production has to be there. It just makes sense numbers wise.
Yeah, no, for me, it's the offense. The fact that the Bengals offense is a force to be reckoned with. And, hearing about the offensive line, that's even great news. I think Mixon he's an average yards per carry kind of guy. But getting, he gets the passes, he'll get the points. And as far as PPR goes, and I think that, 10th is a good pick for him. I just love running backs that can catch the ball at this day and age. And guys like Chubb, I like Mixon over Chubb just because I think the volume of, pass catching is higher for Mixon than it is for Chubb.
Yeah. Again, it'll be interesting. I don't know. Again, these running backs are still so young. I mean, they're like younger than all of us except maybe Tej, but we're talking about them coming like to the point where, okay, is this like the place where they start to slowly decline? And I know we'll touch a little bit more on that, Tej, in terms of the age and all that stuff a little bit later, but that's where I start to have reservations is if, the first half of the year, Mixon was running a bunch of routes on third down, and then they slowly started to kind of dwindle it down. I mean, is that kind of what they're foreseeing this year to look like a little bit more on third downs? I don't know. So I think it's a safe spot. It wouldn't surprise me if he's anywhere between like 8 and 13. I know last year, I remember there was like in the middle of the year, I don't know if you guys remember, somebody asked us on Twitter, Jonathan Taylor or Joe Mixon. And I think it was like week 3. So it was very, very early. And I remember thinking specifically, Shishot and I were like Jonathan Taylor. And I think Shovit, you were like Joe Mixon. And like, I'm not saying that in a wrong way, because at the end of the day, no matter who you had, Jonathan Taylor was first, and I think Mixon was third in total points. So you really couldn't have gone wrong no matter which way you went. But he completely outperformed, I think, where a lot of people expected him to be last year. And I think because of that, naturally, there's going to be maybe a regression, maybe not, but who knows? I think it's a safe spot for him. So that's why he comes in at number 9. Let's move right along. This one's an interesting one. Number 8, the consensus was DeAndre Swift. I didn't have DeAndre Swift in my top 10. Tej, the diehard Lions fan, did not have DeAndre Swift in his top 10. So I think Shovit, you had DeAndre Swift as number 6. Shishot, you had him 8. So Shovit, you had him the highest. Let's hear your DeAndre Swift spiel.
Yeah, so, the passing lane should open up for the Lions this year. All right, you got DJ Chark and you got Jameson Williams. That's going to, the same logic that you said with Mixon with T. Higgins and Chase. I mean, that's the same thing with DeAndre Swift. This guy.
Jared Goff.
Yeah, Jared Goff, he will dump off the ball. I mean, he will give it to DeAndre Swift. And the only concern here is if they're his backup Williams, if he's going to take some of the carries, but he did lead the Lions last year in total touches with 213, and he had 62 pass catches as well, even with when he was on the field. So I think that, he's in for a resurgence. He's coming off an injury. I really like DeAndre Swift this year.
Oh, I guess I'll go next. I love DeAndre Swift. He's like watching Alvin Kamara, and who doesn't like watching Alvin Kamara, right? He's a great player, just put into a shitty situation. But the Lions team last year has improved, and they improved last year as well. Looking at the wide receiver core, I'm not even worried about Jameson Williams. We still got Amon-Ra St. Brown there helping out big time. He was arguably the best wide receiver in football the last month of football. So, having him there, having Swift play all downs, because he was injured for a good part of it. But when he wasn't injured, he was in the top 10 in almost every category. And he led all running backs in receptions, right? Like all running backs. We're not talking this or that. We're talking every single one of them when he's healthy. So the potential is what I'm really, really tied into here versus the potential of, say, like Leonard Fournette, which I kind of know what he's going to do. And even Joe Mixon, I kind of have an idea of what he's going to do. We don't know what Swift's capable of. We don't know that one move to get an 82-yard touchdown is very well in his grasp. And those are the players that I love. as far as consistency, he will be there. As far as catching, he'll be there, and they're going to run him. He's young. He's a young player on a young team. Those kind of teams really like using their running backs. So, but the thing is, Jared Goff, right? If it wasn't for Jared Goff, I would have had him in my top 5. If it was a formidable quarterback, the potential is immense. It's incredible. So, like, these are the players that he may fall to the late, mid second round in some leagues, and he's going to end up being a league winner. So as long as he's healthy, I think the amount of catches and the amount of big playability, he shoots it immediately up into the top 10 for me.
Yeah, no, I definitely see like why you guys think that like these new receiver additions could really open up for DeAndre Swift. But my thought process kind of went the other way when I was thinking about that. Last year when the season started, Amon-Ra St. Brown wasn't playing much for the Lions. The receiver room was pretty barren, so they had to rely a lot on Hockenson and Swift. Now you get DJ Chark as your true X receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be one of the, the top receivers in the league this year. Jameson Williams will join the team, around week 6 or 7. So it's just, and they're going to pass a lot more this year just because Jared Goff will be more comfortable in year 2 of the offense and, et cetera. So it's just, I just think, coupled with all of those new receiving options, the Lions probably passing more, and Jamal Williams being, so prevalent in the Lions offense, especially in short yardage situations and goal line situations, is why I don't think DeAndre Swift will finish as a top 10 running back this year. I still think like as a player, he's a really good player. And like you mentioned, like very explosive, but it's just, there's a lot of mouths to feed suddenly on the Lions offense. And like, I don't see him getting, the volume of like the running backs we previously talked about. And then, the running backs that we're going to talk about the rest of this episode.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? A lot of times we talk about the benefits of having a lot of mouths to feed, but when you have a quarterback who maybe cannot prepare the ample amount of dinner to support all of the people he's got to feed mouths for, it's going to make it a little bit harder, right? Because it's not like Patrick Mahomes is getting 6 different weapons that he can just pick and choose. It's still Jared Goff, and that's where my fear lies, obviously. But I do agree with you. There was a time where DeAndre Swift, when he was healthy, was incredible just because the rate of volumes of targets he would get and catches he would get, right? So even if he was only carrying the ball like 13 to 14 times, he was getting targeted so heavily. So like you said, Tej, is it just a product of the fact that early on in the season, they didn't have enough outside weapons to feed the ball to or feel comfortable with, that they had to rely on their running backs? Or are they going to, figure out a way to see that they have now both and elite in both sides to maximize it both ways? But again, that's where the kind of the overarching theme is going to be, how is Jared Goff going to play? Because he's going to be the guy that puts the ball in their hands. So it's still to be determined. Go ahead. Before you
move on to the next person.
Yeah.
Tej, I think this is a good statistic to find out, because this is going to be used every year for the rest of your life when you play fantasy football. Knowing does, like, statistically over the last, let's say 10 years, do running backs that get receptions, do they do better with better weapons at wide receiver, or do they do worse? I think that would be a good thing to look up at some point, because, like this moment right here, half of us have them in our top 10, half of them don't. And I think that is the reason. That's like the main reason, right? So if we can get like a quantifiable, number, or like some form of analysis on that, that would be wonderful. I think that would help a lot of fantasy players out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that would be really interesting. I know like there's been research done before on like vacated targets and stuff like that, but and how important that is for, when a wide receiver 1 like leaves a team, like in free agency or trade, like how many of those targets go to running backs? Like they get like a big upgrade. But I guess I haven't seen anything going the other way where like, oh, like if they get a wide receiver 1, how does that affect the running back? So that would be something cool to look into for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that would help like quantify this exact argument, like you said, Shashot. So, nowadays, I guess there's analytics for just about everything. So I'm sure that's something that somebody could figure out and put together. But nonetheless, again, I'm with you guys. I think DeAndre Swift, healthy 16 games, the production cannot not be there. Like, I just think the sheer amount of catches he can get, even with the weapons, as long as he plays the entire year and he's healthy, I think the production would be there. But whether it's going to crack the top 10, I guess that's the question. that we're going to have to find out. So DeAndre Swift comes in at number 8. Shisho, you mentioned this guy. Number 7 is his doppelganger, I guess, Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara comes in at number 7 here on the consensus board. I had Alvin Kamara as my number 5 ranked running back. Shisho, you had him 7. Shovit, you had him 7. And Tej, you had him 8. So I had him the highest. I'll start us off. I've had a weird roller coaster of emotions about the New Orleans Saints over this offseason. I started off being like, they suck. Like, oh, they're on the Vikings schedule in London, easy win. Like, yeah, let's just chalk that up as a W. And then I started to think about it a little bit more, right? And I think a lot of that's just predicated on my perception of Jameis Winston as a quarterback, but not so much about everything else around Jameis Winston that now, ironically enough, seems like it's coming together kind of well. The defense was always really good. They have Mark Ingram back now to be the backup to Alvin Kamara. So they're bringing, they have that duo. And with drafting Olave, now I guess Michael Thomas is healthy and ready to go. They're going to get Michael Thomas as that number 1 receiver. Olave is going to be probably one of the best slot receivers in the NFL pretty soon. And then you have, the Harrises and the Smiths and the other guys to kind of take the top off. Kamara is still in a very, very advantageous situation because there was a time where Kamara kind of fell off statistically, and it was because somehow the Saints just stopped dumping the ball off. They had Ian Book start at quarterback. They had to start Simeon. They had to start freaking my most hated, I'm drawing a blank on his Taysom Hill, like my most hated quarterback, or if you can even call him that. They had him starting. So I know there wasn't fluidity in dumping the ball off to Kamara, but I think the Saints for years and years and years now understand that Kamara is not like a 25, 30 carry guy. And even when he was young, they weren't always using him that way. Right. So they know what he excels at. And I think with the offensive line getting I know they lost Teron Armstead, but I still think there's enough pieces now to where Kamara can still just maximize what he does well. And as long as he stays healthy, I think they rely on him enough that the production is going to be there. But I don't know what you guys think. Shovit, I'll kick this one off to you first.
Yeah, I think that volume is the name of the game here. I mean, who's the backup for the Saints as far as running back? Mark Ingram, yeah, but I still feel like it's gonna be Alvin Kamara. He's gonna be the guy who gets the ball. Jameis Winston, you can't really rely on him as a quarterback, throughout the course of the 17 game season. I think that utilizing their running backs is going to be very important for them to be able to get that offense to flow, and therefore, volume is the name of the game, and Alvin Kamara gets the carries and the dump offs as well.
So it's funny because I know, Sweetcar, you said he's not that high volume guy anymore. But he did log his first 200 plus carry season last year. That's, for whatever reason, many reasons the quarterback struggles and whatnot. So he's still capable of handling that workload. So that's good to know, because a lot of these receivers on these top 10 may have reached their peak. Alvin Kamara, some may say has reached his peak, but I don't think so. I think he's still fully there. The injuries come, the injuries go, but it's football season. There's enough medical staff around to take care of these minor injuries here and there. So I think I wouldn't be afraid of Kamara from the workload standpoint. And Shova, you mentioned Jameis Winston not being, whatever type of quarterback you need. But however, when Jameis Winston was under center last year, Alvin Kamara was 5th in fantasy. He averaged 23.2 touches and 5.5 targets a game. Over that span, he was 7th in targets and 6th in receiving yards. So having Jameis Winston increases his capacity from not only having that huge workload from the running standpoint, but from catching standpoint as well. So just knowing those two stats, I was like, this guy's got to be in my top 10.
Yeah, no, I really like all your guys' points on Alvin Kamara. He's definitely one of my favorite players to watch in the league when he has the ball in his hands. I think why I'm a little lower on him than everyone else is because I don't think it's being talked enough about how big of a loss Sean Payton is going to be to the Saints offense. And that's especially in the screen game. Sean Payton, I thought, was best at drawing up screens. And when I think about Alvin Kamara and at his peak, like you mentioned, it was taking screens and, having blockers in front of him and turning that into 20-yard gains. I think about the Packers game on Sunday Night Football where he took the 60-yard
left
touchdown.
side.
Yeah. Yeah. On the left side with the convoy in front of him. Right.
Yeah.
So, so I think losing Sean Payton to scheme him up the easy, receptions that go for 10, 15 yards is going to be pretty big for his value. But, he still should be a top 10 running back because of all the things you guys mentioned. Mark Ingram isn't really a threat. Taysom Hill is probably going to be used less without Peyton there, because like Hill
God,
has
I hope so.
on him or something,
Yeah.
So yeah, I do see the volume, and I do see the receiving ability. I just think it won't be as easy for Kamara as it was when he had like such a good play caller.
Yeah, I think Shishot, the point you made is really, really interesting to me, to kind of piggyback on my point, is because when he saw the increase in carry workload versus catching workload, I think it was when Winston might have been hurt and they had to utilize him more in the running game because their quarterbacks were not sufficient enough to get him the ball the other ways, right? But when he was at his best was in the games that Winston played, which is when he was averaging the most fantasy points, catching the most passes. And so being utilized the best. So if Winston plays the whole year and starts the whole year, and whether he's good or bad or average, whatever, I think the fact that Winston is literally a gunslinger, like that's what he's known to do, I think that right there is going to help the volume of Alvin Kamara and help him finish in the top 10.
Yeah, that opens up surface area on the field, right? There's more places the defenses have to cover when Winston's there versus when he's not.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So he comes in at number 7. Number 6, Shovit, your boy Najee Harris comes in at the consensus number 6. This was an interesting one. I had Najee number 7. Shishot, you had him number 6. Shovit, you had him number 5. And Tej, my man, had Najee all the way up at number 3 on his rankings. Tej, why the Najee love?
I'm kind of surprised that everyone else was so much lower on him, but it just goes back to what works in fantasy football. Volume is king, and Najee Harris had 313 rush attempts last year, the most of any running back in the NFL. And he doesn't have any competition really, and he was drafted in the first round by the Steelers. Mike Tomlin really wanted him, so they're going to use him as much as they can, but like the thing about Harris is, like Pittsburgh's offensive line is poor. So it's tough for him to grind out yards, but with either Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, Pittsburgh is definitely not going to pass as much as they have been in recent years. And then, Big Ben refused to go under center, and that, it's a lot better to run under center in certain situations. So they'll be able to do that with whatever quarterback is starting with them, which should help Harris out there. And he's just going to get a ton of volume, whether it's rush attempts, whether it's check downs and all that stuff. And that's why I think like he's up there with like the other top running backs, just because the volume is just so big.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wish, I could put him higher, but I'm being a little bit realistic just because I'm not sure how this offense is going to be next year, whether Kenny Pickett or Trubisky online. I've got him as 5, which is pretty high just because I think, like you said, the volume is going to be there. I mean, there's Benny Snell, who's their backup, and then there's, so no one else that can take the ball. And if any of those quarterbacks are not able to get it done, then it's going to be a Najee Harris show every day, kind of like I'm thinking like Adrian Peterson was back in Christian Ponder days. I mean, no, there's no other offense there, but if they can get their offense going, then I think that Najee Harris is a concern. So just being that questionable aspect of their offense, I don't know where they will be. I think that has me at 5th, but certainly could finish top 5, top 4.
I like how you made that comparison, and I know that comparison also meant that you're comparing Christian Ponder to Kenny Pickett. So I really hope his career pans out the same way, man, because that's the only way he's going to get that. But no, dude, I love Najee. Last year I was so in love with Najee Harris, but the problem with why, like Najee Harris with the volume Tej from last year, he should have finished as like RB1, right? Volume is the name of the game. Like that volume was insane. Like every other dump off, like obviously every rush, but like he was getting the ball thrown to him every other time because Big Ben, can't move to save his life. So if his first read wasn't there, it was a dump off to Najee. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, I absolutely adored Najee. But again, what I'm seeing is the quarterback, give or take, either stayed the same or got slightly worse. Big Ben obviously wasn't the same Hall of Famer, that he's been last year. So we know that's not true, but we can still assume that maybe the quarterback got worse just from the fact that Kenny Pickett's coming into the NFL as a rookie. So he's got to learn a lot of things, get up to speed with the game. And then Trubisky hasn't really shown much, right? So he's still an uncertainty. So for that reason, the offensive line was so poor, and I still don't think they're great. So let's just say the offensive line is, the same as it was last year. Your quarterback room got worse, if you will. And so for that reason, I worry that if he's getting the, highest level of usage last year, and he still wasn't the number one running back, in a worse offensive situation, I don't know that he's going to surpass what he did last year. And so that's just my reservation there. I know the volume's going to be there, so I'm never going to shy away from not drafting Najee Harris when he, whoever he falls to is going to be happy to get him because he's consistent. He's going to guarantee points. But the upside factor I worry about, is being like a 30 carries, 78 yards kind of guy. And yes, that's volume, but is that really pretty volume? I don't know. So that's why I had my reservations. I just didn't see the offense around Najee improving in the offseason enough.
Was that the lowest on Harris at 6?
No, I think I had him set. No, yeah, I had him 7.
Okay, well, anyways, I think the top 6. If you look at the statistics in the past 20 years or whatever, 1 through 6 can be interchangeable happily, and it would really not make that big of a difference at the end of the season. This stuff happens all the time. You draft this guy, he gets hurt, this happens. Najee Harris can easily break number 1. It's possible, right? Like if there's one person that can be the next Derrick Henry, it is Najee Harris. And we've seen it with our own eyes, the similarity and all kinds of things. But that being said, right, volume, this is something that I've always lived by. I think volume is king in that it'll take you to the playoffs, but you need players that just have that extra oomph factor, and that's touchdowns, right? You get the volume, you add up the yards, whatever, but you got to get the touchdowns to surpass that 27 number that's so beautiful, that 30 number that's so beautiful. You can't do that without scoring touchdowns. And Najee Harris last year only saw 37 touches in the red zone and scored 6 red zone touchdowns. He was 22nd in the league with that staff. That staff is now significantly worse as far as, I wish they kind of revamped the offensive line a little bit more, but having a young quarterback, the fear factor is just not there to worry about the passing game when it comes to Trubisky or when it comes to Pickett, right? Like they're going to be stacking the boxes a little bit more in the goal line situation. So I assume those numbers are going to be lower. I don't know. That just seems like a safe bet to me. So having the volume is great. That puts them into the top 10. But just not having the touchdown upside, because there's a lot of teams with a solid offense that will increase the running back's chances of getting touchdowns versus putting them in this Pittsburgh offense where things are very mumbo jumbo. It could work out eventually, but I don't see it being a blast off situation in the first 8 weeks of the season. So for that reason, I think 6 was a safe number because every running back after this, I mentioned, they're going to have huge touchdown upsides.
Yeah, no, I definitely see like the worries about his lack of ability to score touchdowns last year, but like I've always, kind of had the train of thought that touchdowns are fluky compared to like carries, yards, stuff like that. Like Damian Harris and James Conner both had 15 touchdowns each last year. And like they won't have that again this year. So like I could just see a world where Najee Harris is getting the 25 carries a game that, you guys mentioned. And then he has some positive regression in the red zone. And all of a sudden he scores like 12, 13 touchdowns, with some like 1 yard touchdowns and stuff like that. And like, he's the RB1 or RB2 on the year because of that.
Yeah. Again, I think very strong points. It's no one, I don't see anybody this fantasy year being disappointed that Najee Harris is a person in the position when it's their turn to draft. I think I would be ecstatic to have him on my team as well. Again, you hope that volume versus lack of touchdowns that we saw last year, seeing how good he is. And like you mentioned, he's a running back drafted in the first round, which is hard for us to say nowadays. And the way that running backs drafted in the first round are used versus running backs not drafted in the first round is immensely different. Right. And so for that reason, I think they expect, and again, Mike Tomlin's history is that he uses one running back to the ground for the most part, right? So I think knowing that the volume, and he was a rookie last year, so it's his second year, so he's still so young and fresh. It's like sexy in a way that they can just force feed him to the ground because he's so young and his legs just continue to turn. And that stupid 4.6 whatever speed that everybody was knocking on him during his pro day doesn't mean shit anymore. So Najee Harris, absolutely loved, comes in at number 6. Jumping into number 5, here's the top 5. Number 5, we have our boy Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook comes in at number 5. Ironically enough, I'm a little bit lower on Dalvin Cook this year than most other people. I had Dalvin Cook at 6. Shishot, you had him at 5. Shovit, you had him at 4. And Tej, I believe you had him also at 6. So Shishot, kick us off with Dalvin Cook.
Okay. I mean, it's Dalvin Cook, right? Like Dalvin Cook is a beast. He could do everything. And now there's an open table in Minnesota where players can have a say in how this offense is run. And I think there's been some serious changes that have happened. And as soon as the workouts started, as soon as the drills started this season, we saw Dalvin Cook lining up next to the wide receivers. We see him doing the same training as the receivers. That's scary. That's not just like interesting. That's scary, because if you look up some Dalvin Cook highlights from college, there are a lot of highlights when he's lined up on the slot and he gets like a 20-yard in the air throw, not a screen pass. We're talking deep
Over
throws
shoulder,
downfield, over shoulders. Like, this man is fully capable of being a full-time Deebo Samuel, but a little bit differently, right? Like more agility, less power, and less durability. Without the durability, if he was fully durable, like if I had full faith in Dalvin Cook, this is a easy number one for me, right? In this offense, I'm a big Vikings offense guy. I love where everything is going, and everything should be falling into place exactly how we wanted it to fall into place 3 years ago. So I think, all that being said, having no limitations. I know Madison is like a concern for some people, but forget about it. This is coming from one of the biggest Vikings fans that you will ever hear on this podcast or any podcast. Dalvin Cook is the man. He's the man. The only thing that's holding him back is his own knees. It's like it's his own body that's holding him back. And I think having the offense that we have now, it's more, we're going to have more, what's the word? Like better plays, just the consistency as far as the successes when he touches the ball are going to be way more consistent than when it was in the past, where we were banking on 72-yard runs and a couple of runs. It was a volume guy. He's no longer a volume guy. He has the open field of having to run around all over the field. That changes everything. I don't know if you guys really know many players that can do that, because let's say like a player like Alvin Kamara, well, he doesn't run like go routes down the field. Very rarely do they ever do that, but we're going to be seeing that incorporated into Dalvin Cook's repertoire, which is scary. It's really scary, and he's really good at it. So all that being said, having he's probably going to get little less volume than he has in the past, but that doesn't matter to me, because the upstick of the passing game is immense. And I think Kirk Cousins has become better. The receivers have gotten better. The offensive staff is here to change things for the betterment of the players and utilizing the players' skills more. The touches per game maybe slightly decreased. I don't know. I can't say that for sure yet. But all things considered, this man is elite. This man can do everything any other receiver can do. The power factor, like the goal line carries, he's small, but he's still mighty. He can still push it through the line. So I don't think they're going to be bringing in Madison for goal line carries or anything like that. So, all that being said, this is a very, very safe pick. The only thing that's unsafe about this pick is injuries, and I don't know if I can ever predict that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Minnesota Vikings and it's a running back. I mean, for me, it's like a no-brainer. Like, Dalvin Cook is a beast. Like, that guy, you put him on the field, the Vikings are going to have game plan to give him the ball, to feed him the ball. And you guys already mentioned, like, in the offseason, like, he's catching passes now. I mean, it's Dalvin Cook. How do you shy away from him? I would love to pick up if I could draft Dalvin Cook, I would. And then if I'm concerned about, his injuries, then I go get Madison, who is a serviceable backup. And there's my running back strategy for the rest of the year, and I'm a happy camper. So for that, I love Dalvin Cook as far as a runner, and then getting his backup so that I can solidify my fantasy football year.
What do you got for us, Tej?
Yeah, I really like that strategy, Shovit. Like, yeah, I think if you draft Cook, you do have to get Madison as a handcuff. But the thing about Madison is he's one of those handcuffs where people will draft them like to be like their RB3 or like their flex position, even if they don't have Dalvin Cook, because he does get volume, right? So like in 2020, Dalvin Cook got 72% of the Vikings rushes. Madison got 22%, which is a good split if you are a Cook owner. But in 2021, Cook only got 59%, Cook got 59% and then Madison got 33%. So, because of injuries and because of kind of the way that the Vikings offense was last year, we saw Madison inch closer to Cook's volume. And so like that's where kind of the concern is for me, whether it's an injury or whether it's the way that, the Vikings have the offense designed this year, where they're using a lot of 20 personnel or 21 personnel with both of those guys on the field at the same time. I just think that Madison is going to play a big role in getting a lot of rushes out of the Vikings backfield. And that's my only concern on why I can't put Cook ahead of some other running backs that I know are either going to stay healthier or don't have as big of a backup running back presence to take carries away from them.
And don't forget, we have KOC, Kevin O'Connell, as head coach, and they like to utilize, many running backs he liked to do that when he was in the Rams. So you're right. I think the volume, if we're predicting volume to increase, you're totally wrong. That's just not going to happen. The volume is going to decrease. That's just going to happen. But the big play abilities are still there. And then the catching abilities is a whole new ballgame.
Yeah. So I'll end us home on Dalvin Cook. I obviously, as a Vikings fan, I love Dalvin Cook. I didn't base these rankings off of injury, because then if that's the case, then CMC wouldn't make the list at all. So that's not realistic. But for me, the fear is a lot of like what you guys mentioned, but I'm also looking at it, the optimistic way you guys saw things. I'm seeing it the other way, right? New regime, new offense, Kevin O'Connell running more 11-man personnel, running more 3 wide receivers, right? Passing the ball down the field more, utilizing Justin Jefferson in the slot more like a Cooper Kupp. The one thing that the Rams typically didn't have was much of a bell cow, like you mentioned, as a running back. They used, 3 different running backs. And because of Dalvin Cook's injury proneness, I could see, just because of that reason, Kevin O'Connell just being smarter, because the less Dalvin Cook stays on the field in those gadget type plays where he's lining up on the slot or doing all that, he's going to be way more fresh, and they're going to be able to maximize his abilities when he's actually playing. And then you mentioned my biggest X factor is we have a guy that's running like a 4.28 40-yard dash in Kene Wangu that our last regime thought that the best way to utilize him was run him up the middle like you would a normal running back, which just absolutely is not his skill set, right? So knowing that we went from Mike Zimmer, went from an era where we just loved feeding Dalvin Cook the ball, 2 to 3, sometimes even on third down. So he's getting so many carries, knowing we're no longer in that, and this is a completely different offense. I think when he touches the ball, he can be a lot more effective, but the volume's going to go down, and they're going to look to spread the ball out a little bit more. I have to believe that with KOC's brain, he's going to use Wangu better. I have to believe that Tej, that stat that his Madison's carries are increasing. I have to believe that even if Madison's obviously not as good a running back, Kevin O'Connell is going to want to smartly use Dalvin Cook. So that could stay the same, or Madison could see even an increase. Or like you said, they could both be on the field. So because of that reason, all of those things, I think, again, Cook have like 15 touchdowns, and that would be insane. Absolutely. But his volume, I think, like you said, Shishod, is absolutely going to go down. So in an offense that's completely different than Shovit, you said, it's the Vikings. So why wouldn't you take their running back? Well, this is not the same Vikings anymore. So that's where my reservations are for us hammering home that a Vikings running back is automatically a top 5 fantasy pick. That may not be the case this year. That's my only reservation. So yeah, Dalvin Cook, number 5 on the list. Number 4 comes in Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is the consensus number 4. I have him as my number 3 running back. Shishot, you had him as number 4. Shovit, you had him as number 8. And I believe Tej had him at number 5. So Shovit, actually, number 8, Shovit, give us your Derrick Henry spiel.
Yeah, Derrick Henry, man. A 28-year-old, I get it. Workhorse, and he's going to get the ball. But the statistics that the Titans had last year is that Derrick Henry, when he was on the field, the yards that Derrick Henry had was the same as their backup, right? Like I think it was like 800 yards for Derrick Henry, and then the backup had combined was also 800, something along those lines. So for me, the injuries and being 28, I just think he is going to lose a step this year, and that the Titans are not going to be as
that's what they said last year.
I think now is the time. I think regression is what's due for Derrick Henry. So I'm nervous about drafting him, and I would definitely shy away. I would go for another option instead of Derrick Henry. So he's 8th on my list.
I'm at a loss of words, so somebody else talk.
I still really like Derrick Henry, because he's Derrick Henry. But I'm kind of with you there, Shovit. Like, so, something that I researched while I was at PFF was kind of when in their career running backs start to regress, and like, especially like really good running backs. And so, that's what I found was it's usually around 1,500 or 1,600 carries is where like running backs will start to regress. And like that like held true for the elite ones. Jamal Charles started to flatten at 1,400 carries. Adrian Peterson did at 1,700. And then LaShawn McCoy and Marshawn Lynch showed it around 1,500 and 1,600. And so like, it's Derrick Henry is at that stage. We saw him come back from injury in the playoff game against the Bengals, and he didn't look, like his usual self there. And I think, it could start to happen here where, he's going to start to get banged up a little bit more. He's going to start to lose a little bit of his burst and his explosiveness as he gets later into his career. And just because he's had so much mileage put on him, he might not be, the typical like Derrick Henry, like stiff arm, breaking off crazy runs that we're used to. And he'll just be a good running back, not like the best running back in the NFL.
Oh, that's so sad. That's such a sad story. Yeah, I mean, yes, this is where the numbers don't really matter to me as much. We did a quarterback episode last week, and there are some players, if they're gonna lose you to the league, so be it. If you're gonna draft Patrick Mahomes and he just sucks, then I don't care if I lost that league. I did my due diligence and I drafted a stud. That's the same thing with Derrick Henry. I don't, again, Tej, you're a statistics guy. I can't be using one sample size of the Bengals game to take away what Derrick Henry really means to that team. And now they don't have the studs that they had before, right? Like the Titans suck if you really think about it. It's kind of like a Steelers situation there now. And he's not Najee Harris, right? And that's why I don't have him ranked number one. And when I say he's not Najee Harris, I mean health-wise. He's not young, and he's not as young as him, and he's not as sturdy as him anymore. So, but that was only enough for me to move him down to 4 in my rankings, right? Like I've never ranked Derrick Henry this low ever in my life. So everything you guys have mentioned, I think, I believe I'm with you, but only with you up until about 2 or 3 spots, not all the way down or, taking him out of the top 5 or anything. I think he's one of those players, you just kind of pull the trigger and you're like, if I have Derrick Henry on my team, I should be doing well with this pick. You shouldn't be worrying about the injury so much, just because of like, I can't stress this enough, but like the medical staff in the NFL, like it's just a bunch of Harvard guys and Yale guys. Like they have the top of the line stuff to take care of players nowadays. And players like Derrick Henry get special attention, right? He's probably drinking like, I don't know, some fetus's blood all off season long. I don't know what they're doing. But like they're doing whatever they can to keep him healthy. And yeah, he could, sprain his ankle, do this and that, but that's not what fantasy football you should be worried about, especially with a career like Derrick Henry's had. I don't see the stiff arms going away. I think the speed might be decreasing, but he is that player that gets faster as the day goes on. When it's fourth quarter, he's suddenly faster than everybody else. So these are players that are outliers for me. They're clear outliers, but these are the outliers that I want to ride on his back and run into the end zone. I've never drafted Derrick Henry ever in my league, but every year I regret doing that. And I think now that the value's there, a lot of players like Shovit, Tej, you guys are talking about how there may be a slight regression. I would be the one to jump on this. If I'm the 4th overall pick or the 5th overall pick, I'm not letting Derrick Henry go by.
Yeah, I think a lot of good points there. My thing with Derrick Henry, and Shisho, you should touch on this as our in-house doctor, is this whole Jones fracture that he had. What's the severity of it? Is that specific injury something that lingers? Because we're all of a sudden pegging injury-prone Derrick Henry just because of that, when in reality he's like about as durable as it gets, right?
Okay, yeah. So Jones fracture is not. It's you break a bone, right? You break a bone, your 5th metatarsal in your foot. If you break the other metatarsals, that's the Lisfranc fracture, which you guys have all heard of. But the Jones fracture it's a fracture of your 5th metatarsal, and you're not tearing any tendons. There's no rupture of any membranes. It's just a simple break, right? So when you heal that break, sometimes that break heals stronger than it was before. So you can't, if they fractured his ankle, that's a whole different ball game, right? Like there's attachments to other bones considered, this and that. There's no worries of attachments to other bones. It's just that one simple bone in the foot, and there's no joints in play here. I'm sure it healed back properly, and he's got this whole offseason to heal. So I wouldn't be worried about it. That's a good point. It's not a joint issue. Joint issues are, career enders, season enders, whatnot. But a fracture of the bone ends the season, but you come back just as good, or maybe slightly worse, or maybe a lot better. So it's not something you should just focus on primarily.
Okay. Yeah. And so for that reason, knowing that it's not like an Achilles or something that, we've seen historically as a tremendous amount of regression for athletes, I'm with you, Shishot. He's somebody that I would gladly draft. And if for some reason he sucks or this is the year he regresses, then, so be it. You learn your lesson. But what has history taught us with Derrick Henry? Like you said, there's nothing that keeps this guy down. He gets better the more he plays. The longer he plays, he's better. So is that going to correlate to year after year versus first quarter to fourth quarter? Who knows? But until he proves that he's actually hit a wall and regressing and he's historically becoming injury prone, and it's not just one random injury, it's hard for me to start deeming him all of those things and not a top, arguably a top 5, top 3 running back in fantasy football. So I absolutely agree. That's why I had Derrick Henry.
One more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Where did you have him?
I had him number 3, but he came in number 4 on our consensus.
Real quickly, he averaged close to 30 touches a game last year at this age, right? And the next closest person was 7 touches less than him. So even if he gets, let's say he's old, even if he loses 5 touches, on average, he's still going to be touching the ball more than anybody else using that small sample size. His regression is still not people's peak. So for that reason, I'm not going to rank him 1, but I'm still going to keep him in this top echelon of the players you draft at running back.
He makes me nervous because he reminds me of Saquon Barkley last year when, Saquon Barkley went maybe second round. And that's someone that you're like, it's Saquon Barkley. You got to draft him. He's 24, but he's coming out of an MCL tear
and
as
ankle.
Yeah.
Saquon's got a whole spiel of joint problems. So this is a different scenario, but you're right. You're not the only one that fears this person. Whether it's not wanting to draft him or just looking at his face, he should be feared all the time.
That's a good one. Derrick Henry comes in at number 4. Real quick, I got a breaking news, kind of sad and morbid. Former Cowboys running back Marion Barber dies at the age of 38.
Whoa!
Wow.
Very, very sad. He'll always be remembered for his hardest earned 2 yards in his own end zone. That was one of the craziest runs I've ever seen in my entire life. So super, super sad.
Wow.
So number three, let's jump right back into it. Number 3 on the consensus board is Austin Ekeler. Austin Ekeler was my RB4. Shishot, you had him as your RB1. Shovit, you had Austin Ekeler as your RB3. And I believe, Tej, you had him as your RB2. So Shishot, RB1, Austin Ekeler.
I mean, he's not used as a true 3-down workhorse, but I'm just so big on the Chargers this year. That coach, as Staley, for as many things he gets shat on, and I was one of them that was shitting on him hardcore. But I have transitioned tremendously as far as analytics goes. I am actually on board with going for 2 every single time now. I don't want to kick any more extra points. And I learned this because of Madden. I played a lot of Madden over the last couple of months. And I'm just like, why the hell am I kicking field goals? It doesn't make any sense. At the end of the day, when you have 10 touchdowns, there's a better chance of getting those 2 out of the 4 2-point conversions than kicking all 4 extra points and just getting 4 points out of them. But anyways, I digress. Let's get back to Austin Ekeler. I think this is, everything the muscle hamster couldn't be as far as reaching his potential. This is everything, MJD couldn't be because his career ended a little bit early. We have a short, stocky, super fast, super agile, pass catching, between the tackles running, in a great offense that utilizes all of these things. And that offense just became a top 10, arguably a top 5 offense this year. Why would you not want that running back, right? That seems so for sure. The only thing, the knock on Ekeler is touches. And it's, he was 14th in touches per game at 17.2. But if you really think about it, just imagine watching football and Austin Ekeler getting 17 touches and, 6 of those are catches, screen passes. He usually succeeds on every single screen pass. It's just that the efficiency rate is just tremendous. He touches the ball and he makes things happen. That's just the bottom line. And Herbert becoming better at play action, Herbert becoming better as a quarterback overall and becoming a dual threat. All of these things just enhances Austin Ekeler so much. And you're probably wondering, why not Jonathan Taylor at number 1? Why not, McCaffrey at number 1? McCaffrey, I don't want to talk about. There's many reasons. Jonathan Taylor and Austin Ekeler were the 2 players I decided between. I was like, man, what do I do here? And it came down to Austin Ekeler, not just because of all the skill sets I talked to you about, But because of this offensive change that the Chargers are going through, and it's going to be scary. Remember this, the Chargers are going to be scary. And I think having the number one running back for that offense, with a high share of not only rushes, but targets as well, he could very well end up being number 2 in that team in receiving, maybe number 1. I don't know. And these are all numbers that I like when I look for running back. There's nothing I don't like about Austin Ekeler, whereas some of these other players, I might like everything about them, but I don't like the situation they're in, But I like everything about Austin Ekeler. The target share is amazing. The red zone opportunities are insane. Everything just leads to success. And I think when you compare the top 3, it's very interchangeable. And I want to believe that because of the scenario that everybody's been put through, them having to play against 3 other teams that are going to put up a big fight, going to need big production from Austin Ekeler all day long, I think he's going to produce. So I think it's a very, very easy choice for me. It's Austin Ekeler at 1.01.
That's fair. I'll go. So Austin Ekeler, I had Austin Ekeler as number 4. So again, when you're talking top 5 running backs, it's really just, on a week to week basis, maybe like a point, less than a point difference. So it's not crazy. Austin Ekeler, like you said, it's beautiful watching Austin Ekeler from a fantasy perspective because he just produces and all he does is produce. And it's crazy because like you said, he's not getting typical number 1 workhorse carries at all. And so, him having touchdown production is huge. I know last year he had 12 rushing touchdowns and he had 8 through the air, 94 targets through the air for a running back, 70 receptions. Like that, those are numbers that, even if he has a fraction of those rushing yards, he's still going to be a top 10 running backs just from catching the ball and scoring touchdowns through the air alone. So I do absolutely love Austin Ekeler. The reason I'm a little bit lower on Austin Ekeler this year, and, he's 4th versus, 1, 2, or 3, I guess for me, is because they drafted Isaiah Spiller, right? And Isaiah Spiller is basically going to be, I guess, maybe they're Justin Jackson, since Justin Jackson's gone, he's a free agent. Joshua Kelly drops down to 3rd on the depth chart. So you're looking at Isaiah Spiller as a running back coming out of Texas A&M, and he's kind of like the stocky bruiser, kind of, 15 pounds heavier, 3 inches taller. So my fear is for a guy like Austin Ekeler, who despite his size was still getting touchdowns and touches in the red zone, at some point, are they going to look to be like, in order to maximize Austin Ekeler, because he is so great at catching the ball, just on those really, really tough, like goal line situations where he's going to get hit by like 5-6 guys in a pile. I feel like they tried to use Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson at points to see if they could find somebody to be their red zone guy, and nobody was able to be as productive and as elusive as Austin Ekeler. So they just went back to him. But I think the reason to draft Isaiah Spiller in the 4th round is to hope that he could possibly become something like that. So just from maybe the touchdowns from 20 last year, which is an astronomically high number, to go down slightly, that's why I have him 4th. But in terms of production and being happy if I got him, I mean, he's a stud. So there's really no reason to not.
Yeah. No, Shashawn, I agree with like everything you said there. Like that was the perfect way to describe Austin Ekeler. I think it goes back to, if you like McCaffrey this year, you should love Austin Ekeler. He's just a better version of McCaffrey. Ekeler is going to be a part of a much better offense.
Better version of McCaffrey?
Yeah, I think so, because, I don't want to jump ahead to when we talk about McCaffrey, but like, I don't see the Panthers offense just having these scoring situations as much as the Chargers do. The Chargers could have the best offense in the NFL, and Ekeler is going to be a big part of that. He can get 60, 70 receptions, and, also a lot of carries out of the backfield too. And he's just so explosive, and, he's just really going to provide that Chargers offense with the boost that they need in the short yardage area and everything like that. So that's why I think, Austin Ekeler should be being drafted within the top 3 in fantasy drafts this year.
Austin Ekeler is in a complete offensive team. They're definitely utilize him to get Justin Herbert going. The running back complementing the rushing attack, complementing the passing attack. So he'll definitely be used. He'll get the catches. But outside of all of that, I mean, the most important thing is this guy plays fantasy football, and he is very aware of being in a fantasy football league. And you got to just love that from a player when you're like, I got to get my owner's points, and he'll do that for you. And I think that, having Austin Ekeler, his abilities, all of that, but that's just a cherry on the top for me. But he's 3rd for me because I think about, when I did the list.
I'm just going to start celebrating the touchdowns right now. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, he's third for me because if I was number 1 or number 2, I'd rank the guys that are ahead of him. I would draft him before Austin Ekeler, but I mean, if you get third pick, he's the guy I'm going with. I would be very happy drafting him as well.
I think that's a really great point that does not get said enough. A lot of players are annoyed when you bring up fantasy, right? Like you tweet at a guy and be like, you didn't get me points. Like, fuck your fantasy, bro. I don't care. I'm playing in real life.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people don't give a shit about that. But the fact that Austin Ekeler is so adamant about him playing fantasy football and all that, dude, he's checking, right? That means he's at least on the app looking. He knows his points. Like he knows where he's ranked. That stuff might matter. That stuff might be the difference between, an extra third down where he needs to fall over and run the clock. And he's like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to take it in for a touchdown. Hell yeah, fantasy owner. So who knows? Austin Ekeler comes in at number 3. Number 2 is going to be the highly debated Christian McCaffrey, giving a lot of people, fantasy owners specifically, PTSD, myself included. Christian McCaffrey comes in as the consensus number 2. Scary guy to I was in like butterflies in my stomach, knots when I was trying to rank this guy and even think about what to talk about because, I mean, let's be real. We know what CMC is. He's an incredibly talented, like top of the line fantasy producer because when he's on the field, like there isn't a huge advantage to Christian McCaffrey versus a lot of even the number 3, 4, or 5 guys, right? He just puts himself in an echelon that is really, really hard to ascertain at times. But the problem is he literally is never healthy and he's not healthy. And you can't not draft him because you can't draft based on health. But, you also I don't know, if you pass on him and somebody else gets him and he's healthy, you're going to never forgive yourself if you draft him and then he gets hurt week 3, is out for the year. You're like, why did I do that? I knew that was going to happen. The trend tells me he gets hurt. So it's a lose-lose situation with CMC. My thought process is, man, I hope I don't have the number 2 pick because if I do, it's going to be really, really difficult for me if somebody takes Jonathan Taylor. So again, he's number 2. I don't need to spend a lot of time on knowing what's good about CMC. We all know that. But the fear factor for me and reservations I have with the difference between him and number 1 is just the fact that, we don't know how many games he's actually going to play.
Yeah, I've got him as number 1 because, I mean, barring no injuries, this guy is a workhorse. He's going to be the number 1 target. He's going to get the number 1 target share for that team. And so for me, it's you get CMC, and I think that this would be my draft strategy. But then, you maybe pick up guys like, I don't know, Breece Hall, someone that can get you, someone that that has the upside this year that maybe people don't really think about. So if you're gonna pick CMC as number 1 this year, then you really need to have a solid, 6th round running back strategy that you can get, that you can say, okay, maybe this guy could probably give me what I lose from CMC. Maybe Elijah Mitchell this year. Someone that has the upside, but maybe you're not certain about. So I still go with CMC because I know that if he's healthy, he can get me the points that I need. But I can't shy away from not getting CMC number 1.
But when Jonathan Taylor is available and you don't have to worry about injuries, you still go CMC?
Yes, I do. Because, I mean, the Colts...
Bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for you.
Yeah, because, I mean, CMC was just 100% part of the game. And Jonathan Taylor runs the ball a lot. I mean, he's a runner, right?
He's 99% part of the game. Yeah.
I mean, he runs, and he's gonna get the carries. But is he that involved in the passing game? And
you're
not
right.
so much. So I think
right. Absolutely right. I guess I'll go next. I have him ranked 3rd. Honestly, I feel like I should have ranked him 4th. Should have moved Derrick Henry to 3. There's certain players you just you don't worry about health, like Dalvin Cook, right? Like his injuries are minor. He misses 2 games, comes back, loses 2 more games the next year. You're like, fuck, Derrick. I mean, come on, Dalvin. Like, I know what you can do. Like, stay on the field, but you still draft him the next year, not worried about injuries. And there's players like Derrick Henry, who's, you still draft him, not worried about injuries because of the type of injury. Christian McCaffrey has a serious hamstring injury. It's so serious that they're not even letting him do anything in practice right now. They're basically putting him in bubble wrap to make sure he's ready to go for week 1. That is not the attitude I want to go into my fantasy season with my number 1 pick. Like, the chance of losing him is maybe higher than the chance of not losing him in the season. Like, the last 2 seasons, he's broke Sweetcard's heart. He broke my heart. It's just every year, it's just a lot of heartbreaks happening. At what point do you just not go with the trend? At what point are you at fault for choosing him because you know what he will do eventually throughout the season? Again, you can't predict injuries, but I will bet you if you did some sort of psychoanalysis on Christian McCaffrey, that the fears of running the same routes that he did before, the fears of making those same cuts, they're very well there. They're deeply ingrained in his head. He was even hesitant about coming back last year. He was like not feeling himself. So I think the fear factor just within himself, his own abilities, he's probably going to tone it down a little bit, right? What made CMC, I don't think we will see that same thing because they're going to bubble wrap the shit out of him unless they really need to. But again, when he's on the field, the 4 games that he was on the field last year, he averaged 26 fantasy points. So it's like, so that's the part where Shovet's analysis makes complete sense, because if he plays, he's going to be number 1. He is easily the greatest fantasy football player I have ever seen in my time of playing fantasy football. You haven't seen a better fantasy football player. So just using that logic, I can see why some people will choose him at number 1, but just seeing the heartbreaks and being a big part of that heartbreak and knowing that there's Ekelers and Jonathan Taylors who don't really do that type of heart. Ekeler does break your heart sometimes, but that offense is just so much fun to watch. But Jonathan Taylor, like for me, if I had to choose one or the other, I'm going Taylor over McCaffrey, just because the security is a big part of it. It's not, you don't play fantasy football for 4 weeks. You play fantasy football for 18 weeks. Or more in some leagues. And I think just the longevity factor and the fact that the Panthers have been so criticized for using him too much, I think the Panthers are going to tone it down. Christian McCaffrey is going to tone it down, and it's not going to lead to 26 fantasy points. It may lead to 21 fantasy points a week.
Yeah. No, I definitely see where both of you guys are at. My thing with McCaffrey and taking him number 1 overall is if or like when he does get injured, McCaffrey doesn't have like a handcuff that will put up a lot of fantasy points for you to replace him, like Madison is with Cook, and like other teams have. So like that's my thing with McCaffrey is like, all right, like if I take McCaffrey and like he goes out, then I'm like completely out on like all those things, and like I have to reach deep into my bench to find someone to become my second RB or whatever. But yeah, like you mentioned, like if he plays, like he's not even really a running back. He's like a half running back, half receiver, and so he's gonna get 70 to 90 receptions if he plays the full season, which is like good for like an actual receiver, like a full-time receiver. And then yeah, he's a great rusher. Like my rushing yards over expected metric, which adjusts for situation and defenders in the box and how well the offensive line blocks and everything. 0.5 rushing yards over expected last season, and then 0.67 the season before that. So like he's doing really well rushing the ball. Great receiver. If he plays the full season, he's easily the RB1, I think. But it's just the lack of the handcuff and the injury history that had him put as RB4 for me.
Yeah, I agree. Like Chuba could be like an RB3 maybe for you as a flex spot if McCaffrey goes down, but their skill sets are so different, and that's what makes CMC so unique, is that he won't get a true handcuff. It's like almost like when Cam Newton is hurt, or and then comes in like somebody who's a pocket passer. Well, the offense is entirely different all of a sudden. So like for that reason, yeah, you're exactly right. Chuba does not create the same upside being in the same offense that McCaffrey has. So that's what makes him such a unicorn. And I'm praying for the person that somehow gets stuck with CMC this year, that he stays healthy up until maybe he plays me. But if that's the case, I think the CMC people drafting CMC will be people that have never drafted him and experienced him getting hurt before. And the people that pass on CMC, even when maybe they shouldn't, are the people that have PTSD from CMC getting hurt. I think right. I think CMC will be the most emotionally like drafted or, not drafted player this year. So, and you can't go wrong with both ways, right? Like, because the potential is so high, you want to experience the greatest fantasy player of all time. So people that never drafted him want him. And the people that got hurt, there are Jonathan Taylors and Ekelers around. So you're like, wait, do I need to go through that pain again and not make the playoffs? Or should I just latch on to Jonathan Taylor, which sounds like a great idea, right? So it's like, you can't go wrong. Just either you go safe or you go with sexiness. Yeah. And I mean, Jonathan Taylor would argue otherwise, as he makes the top of our list. He was in fact the sexiest running back last year, and he is coming back to maybe be the sexiest this year. Number 1 on our consensus board. I had him number 1. Shishot, you had him number 2. Shovet, you had him number 2. Tej, you had him number 1. So again, this guy was, consensusly pretty high for all of us. And I think Shishot, you summed it up for me perfectly, in that you're getting to choose if you're, drafting between CMC and Jonathan Taylor there at the number 1 pick, right? Super, super young, never been hurt. in an offense that, again, seems like it's completely designed around him. There's not anybody getting many rushing attempts there. Hines gets some of their catches, but even Taylor is a serviceable pass catcher. So maybe they start expanding that game a little bit more because he's still so young, and he's the guy that had a historic season last year that has still yet to tap his potential. So for me, it's a no-brainer when you're going with those two, because yes, the upside for CMC is really, really high. Maybe Taylor's is slightly lower, but the longevity factor and the fact that he's so young and the fact that if he has a fluke injury and he misses the whole year, you're not going to kick yourself because there was no way for you to know or think that that was even a possibility. So for that reason, Jonathan Taylor to me is the consensus number one. There's no sharing of rushing carries at all. Again, Hines is not carrying the ball. Marlon Mack's gone. So
they did get Philip Lindsay, and they just got one more person. I forget the name.
Philip Lindsay. There's a reason Philip Lindsay's been bouncing around to like 4 teams in the past 3 years, right? So hopefully he's not really, coming to take anybody's job or carry many balls.
So my thing about Jonathan Taylor and why I'm so high on him and why I'm so excited to watch him again this year and as I think he'll become the RB1 is because the Colts do a good job of putting Jonathan Taylor in advantageous situations to run the ball because of, when they use him, against like lighter boxes, sometimes they're in shotgun with like different types of RPOs and the way Wright kind of schemes up that offense, coupled with how well their offensive line blocks. Jonathan Taylor last year, if an average running back was in Jonathan Taylor's situation, my metrics show that they would have gotten about 4.7 yards per carry, which would have been 13th best in the NFL. Just because of, how well that situation was. He got 5.6 yards per carry, which is absolutely insane. So he was getting basically a yard more over expected than average running back. So even if he regresses this year and becomes just, an above average running back, but not like the elite season that he had last year, he's still going to be getting 5 yards a carry with a lot of volume. And, the touchdowns opportunities are going to be there for him. It's just a really good situation for running back to be in, and he's just a great running back. So that's why I think, he has a very high floor, and he has that ceiling that he showed last year where he can be the RB1, despite not having the receiving ability that other running backs that we've talked about have.
Sure. I have him as number 2, and it's not a knock on him. It's just that I just think that CMC can deliver you results barring no injuries. I'm really hoping that he doesn't get injured and crossing my fingers and all that. But, we'll see throughout the course of the year what ends up happening. And I'm willing to roll the dice on that. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he finished number 1 last year, a beast of a running back. The thing is that, at times they did kind of shy away from him during games, and we're like, where did Jonathan Taylor go? But then he has like these breakaways and 80-yard runs or whatever that like makes up for all of that. But yeah, I mean, definitely think this guy can finish 1 this year. Personally, just have him 2 because I think I have more hope on CMC.
Yeah, dude, I've had Jonathan Taylor for the past 2 years, and he's been nothing short of amazing, and it's just getting better. You guys think last year was the best he's ever done? Well, let me tell you why that's going to be even better this year. And that's because now he has the only quarterback in the NFL that throws more than 8.6 targets per game to their running backs. We have the most running back friendly quarterback playing for the Colts now. That takes away the fear that he's not a good pass catching or he doesn't get the volume, right? Because Matt Ryan loves throwing to his running backs. That's one thing about Matt Ryan that's just a fact. He led the league last year in red zone touches with 90 freaking 2. You know how many touchdowns that could be if a play went one way or the other? That's unreal. I don't think that's going to change. I think they're going to stick with this strong offensive line they have and pound the ball. One of the few teams that are not willing to transition to like pure passing team. They get an old Matt Ryan. I'm sure he doesn't want to like rip off his arm throwing, 50 times a game. So there's going to be a lot of Jonathan Taylor running the ball, and there's going to be a lot of Jonathan Taylor catching the ball. So, again, the only reason why I have Ekeler over Taylor while I'm hyping up Taylor like I'm his dad is that the offense for the Chargers are going to be next level. It's just going to be something where our jaws are going to be dropping left and right. So that factor is the only reason I have Jonathan Taylor at 2, but there is nothing to not like about this guy. The only thing that was worrisome versus in the CMC conversation was the lack of touches in the passing game. But now he has the quarterback that throws the most passes to his running backs, and that'll immediately change everything.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. When you're having the coin toss between two guys who are going to have similar production and one guy who can't stay on the field versus one guy who is, again, just sniffing his potential, I think it's a no-brainer to me personally. But we'll see. We'll see how this season shakes up. Those are the top 10 consensus running backs that we have on our list for fantasy football for 2022. That's all I got, man. I know this was a very, very long episode. Thank you so much for sticking through it with us. All of your insight on the analytics, incredibly useful, insightful. We're more than happy to have you back on at any point if you ever just want to shoot the shit and talk football, because that is absolutely all we do. You guys have any final words for Tej?
Dude, this has been fun, man.
Thank you. Yeah,
thanks
thank you
a
so
lot.
much for your time.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on, guys. Like, I really enjoyed coming on here. You guys are doing like really good stuff. Definitely going to listen to some of the previous episodes, because like you guys were great to talk to. It was a really enjoyable experience. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Tej. Again, thank you so much, man. You are more than welcome to hop on at any point in the future. This is going to wrap up the episode of the top 10 running backs in fantasy football in 2022. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're the Only Playbook. Peace out, guys.